an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Skysworn Chapters 14 and 15 and a little bit 13. In these chapters, Lindon auditions, and he has to do like prison and beat the shit out of somebody, almost kill them on his first day. And we also meet somebody from the Akura clan, actually more than one, and I am still not sure what her deal is. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Andy sent me an email a little bit earlier about the release of the next book. And let me go back to this, Andy. Wintersteel. The length is 517 pages. And while he overpaid for my coverage of that, he said that I should keep it as a tip, basically. And thank you, Andy. I really appreciate that. I am very, very excited about that. I know that Andy said that he was coming out with about 2 a year. So I'm wondering when the one after that, if that will be, around October time or what. But once I catch up, I will probably follow him on social media so that I can also keep abreast of the latest news, because I like doing that with authors. It's fun. Oftentimes they will share interesting, fan art and whatnot as well. So, back to this. I am really so one of the things that I've realized that I enjoy the most about these books is the constant one-upping of somebody that we knew who was very powerful. It's a constant theme throughout the series that we will believe somebody is one of the highest ranking or highest power people that nobody would want to fuck with. And then we find out, oh, indeed, somebody is more than willing to fuck with. And we see exactly how that pans out. So in that regard, the Akura clan basically fits the bill. We find out a little bit later, because Lindon has it pretty much explained to him, that they essentially own the empire, and the emperor runs it for them, but they are the owners of it. And therefore they have the kind of power that is so far beyond what anyone else even comes close to, that there is just this inherent fear there. And we don't get, I don't believe, a real explanation of why so many of them are so high ranking, because we saw the reaction that Ethan had last episode of coverage, where he is told that he needs to be the emissary to the Akura clan because of what's going on with Red Moon Hall. And he behaved as if that was essentially a death sentence. Like, he was really genuinely at first, freaked out that they were sending him on this mission. And then he sort of collects himself and seems to be like, oh, you know what? It's actually a good idea. We're going to be fine. Completely manages to be practical about it. But the fact that he had that reaction initially was concerning. And then when he arrives, over and over again is the concern that he could be killed and literally nobody would care. Not only would they not care, but the emperor would have to apologize for his shitty servant that he sent getting killed, is kind of the situation that he would wind up being in. So there's this sort of implication that they have their own family-derived power in the same way that the Aurelius family did, that is just so advanced. And we have gotten some information regarding the Aurelius family being sired by... Ooh, we haven't seen Suriel in a minute, actually. I'm just realizing that. But by one of the, like, basically archangel types before he ascended to that status, Abaddon. And I'm wondering if that's true of the Akura clan as well. If they have links to somebody who was just so incredibly advanced that it somehow, like, translated genetically to all of his children following. But anyway, I ran out of time last episode and I didn't get a chance to talk about chapter 13 in its entirety. I talked a lot about a variety of things, which is Lindon showing up. And I love the fact that, like, he is powerful enough now that him coming at Yeren without warning, all she can interpret it as is somebody of great power heading toward her really quickly. And the fact that Lindon has advanced enough that that's the way that he's registering to her senses. I am certain that he would be so pleased to hear that was the reaction that she had. She never says anything or, but I love this so much. And when he shows up, everybody reacts very strongly. Lindon is, as he's linked to Orthos, he has that fucking black flame eye thing going on. And so does Orthos. And everybody is looking at the two of them in utter panic. The people had run, peeking in from around the corner. They looked terrified. A shop owner shut his door with a bang. And Lindon says, "I apologize, but surely you can see why I can only join the Skysworn. How can I fight for the Empire when merely revealing my contracted partner causes a panic unless I work for the Skysworn?" Which, honestly, makes a ton of sense. Basically, it's like, well, sure, I might be Darth Vader, but I'm like your Darth Vader. Like, I'm on y'all's side. So certainly that has to mean something, right? Renfei is very upset, and Bai Ro is literally like, has Lindon up against a wall and is like in his face. When they say, "How did you get out of the tower?" it says Lindon looked genuinely confused. "We just walked out. They seemed busy." Later on, we find out that Orthos burned a hole in the wall. So the fact that he looks genuinely confused here, I'm like, is he really, or is he just becoming that much better a liar? It seems like he's just a better liar than he used to be. Or maybe he's always been a good liar and we just haven't seen a ton of necessity because he is very big on tricks. So maybe he has like a knack for lying that I just don't really remember. So at this point, we are in Lindon's, or in Yaren's head for this whole interaction, by the way. Yeren held her sword at the ready, careful not to send any Madra flowing through the weapon. If Renfei sensed it, the battle would begin too early. And when she sheathes her sword, somewhere around her core, her uninvited guest sent out a pulse of disappointment, like a craving gone unmet. It pushed against the seal on her skin, but that dam held. How long will that last, she wondered. If Ethan didn't come back in time, she'd have to find a solution herself. He'd hinted and teased about a way to get this parasite out of her, but he'd also made it clear as glass that he'd rather she use it. He wanted her to be one of these emissaries, or whatever she'd be called, if she didn't work for Red Moon Hall. She had no interest in that. She'd rather walk away from the sword forever than lose to this disgusting thing inside of her. She couldn't end such a long fight by giving up. not even by taking it over herself. This is very interesting to me because I don't really... It says, like, when she looks at the memories that her master had from the remnant, the memories clearly let her know that he was disgusted by it. He thought it was a burden, and that he was waiting until she advanced enough to be rid of it, which I don't feel like we've really gotten information on that you can advance enough that you can shed it, which is really interesting to me. Again, I don't know what that looks like if it's because it's come so close to leveling up with her that she's been really concerned a couple of times. And I'm wondering, she's only just barely managing to stay ahead of it. I wonder how it advances, and I want to know what point she would be able to shed it if it's managing to keep up with her so closely. You know, is it just getting to sage level that would be the thing that could get her to kick it, you know? And what exactly is it that Lindon or that Ethan is thinking about her taking it over? Because I feel that if she sees it as, you know, what is it that she says specifically? She'd rather walk away than lose to this thing inside of her. She couldn't give up, not even by taking it over herself. I think it's really interesting that she sees taking it over as a type of giving up. And I wonder if that's because she doesn't really understand what taking it over would entail. I don't know what information she has on how that would work and what she doesn't have. And I don't know, because we haven't really seen the conversations between her and Ethan about it. I don't know what Ethan personally has information about. Like, does he know of a way that this could go that's different than the traditional way in which somebody would take something like this over? There's a lot about how this would work that I feel maybe she isn't privy to, like the information on how that could go. Maybe all she knows is the context of how Red Moon Hall handles these things. And there might be another way that she isn't aware of. But, you know, I don't know. And the fact that Ethan hasn't necessarily told her is curious to me. I don't know. So, anyway, let's see. The other four had gone into an uneasy standoff. We have to bring him to the Underlord. If he wants to invite a Black Flame to try out, that's up to him. And Lindon's like, yeah, that's fine. And this is when we get this, like, first Lindon gets cuffed, and he also gets brought to see, oh God. So first there's the thing with a Sylvan River Seed waving, or Yaren waves at it, and she, like, turns away as if she's frightened, and Yaren sighs. And I'm like, I really kind of was hoping that she was over that by now. And I'm wondering if the proximity of these, like, the blood spawn has made the blood shadow in Yaren a little bit more alarming than it had been, because it seemed like she got over it a little bit, but maybe I'm overestimating that, and she didn't really. She just listened to Lindon's instructions when he told her to go and touch Yaren. So they ran side by side for a while as she tried to sort out what to say. And finally she says, "You followed me. Why? 10 seconds ago you didn't want to fight." And this is when he says, "You followed me for the best part of 2 years. It seemed like my turn. When I stopped looking at all the problems and I just asked myself what I wanted to do, I realized that I wanted to come with you, so here I am." And she blushes and gets kind of, like, overwhelmed and sort of, you know, doesn't really know what to say, and sort of ends with, "Well, I'm glad you fucking wised up," is basically how that comes out. So then we go to the half silver manacles that he has clapped on him, and his conversation. We're back in like his point of view. And his conversation with the Underlord, Narugwe. He appreciates direct answers more than good manners, but you should be respectful, is what Renfei says, which I really appreciated her pointing that out so that he knows not to be obsequious, because that's just going to irritate the guy. And Bairo says, tell the truth. And that's all he says, but it's much more to the point. Just be fucking sincere. Probably this guy could tell if Lindon weren't being honest. So Narugwe comes in and he says, you're part of the Aurelius family, but you weren't born to it. Where were you born? Asks all of these questions about, you know, how many golds there are, where he's from. Are there more black flames where you're from? And he says, so this is something that Ethan taught you. And Lindon's like getting the sense that this dude is kind of trying to find out something specific, but he doesn't really know what the dude's going for. He closes the door at this point and asks, did you ever break that arm as a kid? Back when you had it, I mean. And I don't know what to make of this at all. I am so curious, because I feel like eventually we're going to find out exactly why he asked this question. Lindon says both of them, yes. And he says, and how did they treat that break back in Sacred Valley? We weren't the richest family in the clan, sir. We had simple elixirs and a scripted sling. No life artists? Only for more severe injuries, honored sir. And burns? You ever burn yourself? Minor burns only, sir. His voice had grown quiet, and he wasn't sure why. Well, since they don't heal burns back in Sacred Valley, I'll tell you how we do it here. Blood Madra removes unhealthy tissue and grows some more. Life Madra smooths it all out, heals it together with the rest of your body so that you'd never know you'd been burned at all. And that's just a general picture. If you get a specialized healing path or some decent elixirs, the whole thing can be done in a breath. He ran his little fingers across his scarred cheek. Black fire hurts a little worse. So, I don't know about the arm thing. It feels like with the, like he's trying to get across to Lindon by asking about the burns, whether or not Lindon has ever experienced that kind of pain, and whether Lindon understands how much more difficult it is to heal. The arm thing, though, feels so specific, and I don't know if it's like related to him having this false arm now, the construct arm, but I don't know. They tell me you're requesting entry into the Skysworn. Did Ethan tell you to do that? I probably should have waited for his permission, but I didn't. He doesn't know. But he was the one who turned you into a black flame. He helped me along this path, yes. Did he do that to your core? And he says no. What did he want you to do with this new path? What purpose did he have for you? And this is when Lindon finally starts to like figure it out. For the duel, I asked him for a path that might allow me to fight somebody stronger than me. And this is when he's like, oh yeah, for the duel. You know, the duel that he definitely didn't set up and propose, did he? And he proposed this duel, held you to it, then held out the path of black flame as your only salvation. That doesn't sound like a plan to you? Lindon says, he's pushing me forward. He's helping me grow. Narugwe unfolded his arms and leaned closer. Into what? That is a good fucking question, sir. I mean, like by row, when he sets eyes on Lindon the first time and they realize about how he has like these pure Madra channels and how he can like clean himself up so quickly, and the Sylvan can help him as well. He says flat out, somebody's creating a monster. So that's clearly what Narugwe is feeling right now. Nothing that I know of. What did he say you would do after the duel? He says, nothing that I know of. He's helping me advance. The duel is over. In the middle of an imperial crisis he helped cause, he's trying to slip a black flame into my Skysworn while he tries to take over himself. I know what he's doing, linking underlords to the Skysworn. He's trying to win them over from me. And I am not confident this is what he's actually doing. I completely understand why Narugwe is of this opinion, but I think Narugwe is thinking way too small. Ethan has a lot more in mind than anything to do with just taking over the Skysworn. Like, nah, son. He's aiming way higher, and this is just a stepping stone on the way. Whatever was happening out there had put too much pressure on the Skysworn captain. Either way, Narugwe had decided Lindon was part of it. So he gets right in Lindon's face and basically behaves as if he is about to execute him and says, lower your head. And Lindon really goes like quickly, it's not Ethan, and taps into the black flame, trying to melt the cuffs around his wrists, forgetting that they were half silver. And that does not work. And then he starts to say, a friend wanted to join Yaren. I didn't want to, but I couldn't let her down. She just wanted help, and so do I, of course. Or she just wanted to help, and so did I, of course. Ethan adopted her too, the captain said quietly. Why? What was special about her? And he goes through the whole, like, she was a sage. And then we jump into Narugwe's head. And I really loved that we did this here. It was very enlightening. Narugwe wasn't an Aurelius, so he had to rely on his spiritual perception to find someone. He'd long been jealous of the Aurelius bloodline legacy. It was wasted on them, he felt. So he finds Yaren, and he senses that bit of the what do you call it? Blood shadow in her. And it's sealed. He can tell that it's sealed. But yeah, he realizes that his people probably mistook what was inside of her, and they didn't even see it. And he also realizes that they're going to be annoyed when they realize. Could Ethan have done this intentionally? No. He must have picked this girl up months before Jai Daisho had opened the Western Labyrinth, and he couldn't have known the Jai Underlord would attract the attention of Red Moon Hall. Or could he? How far ahead had Ethan's plans gone? If not for Narugwe's vigilance, Ethan would have slipped a blood shadow into the Skysworn. The Underlord wasn't surprised no one had caught it before, but Narugwe could tell. If she wasn't part of Red Moon Hall herself, she was well on her way. Now the Black Flame and the Blood Shadow's hosts were in his power. He could rid the Empire of both of them. And then what would happen? He would provoke the Aurelius family at least. Everyone expected the Aurelius to replace the Jai clan in the ranks of the great clans. And now that Jai Daisho was dead, this would be the worst possible time to make new enemies. And even if he were willing to face that problem, there was still the Sage of the Endless Sword. Ethan said he was dead, but could Narugwe accept anything Ethan said? No, he couldn't. If the sage showed up alive and his disciple had been killed by a fellow High Gold, he would have no one to blame. But if she had been killed by an Underlord, Narugwe wouldn't last any longer against an Archlord than a Copper would, and the sages were the greatest of the Archlords. Now, I don't know if this is out there, Andy, but if you have a chart that shows me the ranking system I would be very interested to see it. Maybe, if there's a way to cover up certain parts of it that maybe I haven't gotten to yet or whatever. But the fact that a sage is one of the archlords, how does that work? Is that like a low gold being basically a jade? Or is a sage like a level within archlord like low gold is within gold? Andy says the power levels are intentionally a bit vague at this point in the series. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, since I said that like one of the things that keeps happening is we keep being like told somebody is super powerful, and then we get to see how incredibly like diminished they appear to be when next to somebody of true power. And then that person is shown to be not even all that either. So we can't keep doing that if we are aware of the entire system. I guess that makes sense. So he couldn't kill her himself. He would prefer not to antagonize the Aurelius family by executing Lindon either. And now he had 2 enemies with backgrounds he couldn't afford to offend. Well, not 2, 3. And then we get a reminder of the Akura clan. And that whole thing about how like, oh yeah, we have a daughter that we're sending to you. And basically put her through the fucking ringer. If she dies, oh well, you're not going to be in trouble for it. So he decides that he is going to fold these 2, as he puts it, into the same plan. They could go through the evaluation process like usual, and Ethan Aurelius couldn't complain. If they failed, they would join the reserve, and Narugwe could still find a place for them. And if they succeeded, so much the better. They would share a fate with all the Empire's enemies. What does that mean? Like, if they succeed, they share a fate with all the Empire's enemies. Does he mean like, if they succeed, we'll just turn on them in battle? I don't really know what he means. But at this point, Narugwe pulls back and tells Lindon very suddenly that he's free to go. Without a backward glance, Lindon scurried out of the room. He would be headed for his contracted partner and to Yaren, and soon to his death. Now, I said at the last chapter, or the last episode of coverage, Phil Norton says Sage equals Archlord plus a little extra. Okay. Archlord plus. I had said that I really didn't like that it said and soon to his death. I'm realizing like we're seeing this from Naru's point of view, so it may just be that he thinks that's for sure what's going to happen and he's going to wind up very, very wrong. I wouldn't be totally surprised to find out that like there's a way to die and come back in this story, but I guess we'll find out. So let's go to 14. Andy says Narugwe says that regretfully they will have sacrificed themselves for the Empire. I mean, I guess it's just like they would share a fate with all the Empire's enemies. I guess dying. It just sounds like, but I get what you mean. Okay. All right. So they go to this fairground. And Lindon is looking around at all of these people of like who have all these different gold signs, and he is feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Yaren made her way to the high gold tent, and Lindon started to make his way toward the low gold area. He stopped almost immediately when the green armored guards saw him, and their faces went hard. One of them drew a sword, and the other's hands started crackling with lightning. Byros stood with his arms folded as though whatever happened to Lindon was no business of his, but Renfei stepped up and spoke to them. What she said must have worked because they backed away, but they still didn't look pleased. And I don't think that I quite realized how everybody, like, the reaction that everybody was going to have to him individually. I kind of expected, I think, that if anybody was going to, like, take issue with this, as soon as they saw that he was being sort of sanctioned, they would back off. And I think that I expected that news would have gotten out that he was with the Aurelius clan, because, like, you know, being the only black flame around, I would believe would get you something of like a reputation, or that news would travel about that. And that simultaneously, news would also travel about how you are part of this like high-ranking family who, I mean, you know, we hear from Narugoy's perspective that it looks like the Aurelius family is going to take the Jai clan spot. So I guess I figured that the Aurelius family name was going to protect Lindon, and that he would be seen as more of like, he would be seen as very dangerous, but also somebody that maybe people would want to suck up to a little bit. And I was surprised that it doesn't seem that anybody really knows anything about him. And I'm wondering if the fact that he's the only like black flame, if that's just been kept completely hidden. I thought that word would have gotten out, but I'm beginning to realize that the Skysworn seemed to think people would panic. And so maybe they just kept all of that information to themselves. And this is the first time that anybody is finding out that he even exists. And that is pretty intense. So Lindon, like Orthos is kind of like, man, we're surrounded by people who do not like our ass. What are we even doing? And Lindon tries to be like, man, look, we'll be in their Soulsmith library for one day, and like the risk will have paid it for itself. But Orthos isn't entirely convinced of this. So he goes up to basically a registrar and tells her his name. And I love this. She scanned down a scroll and her eyes widened when she found his name, or perhaps when she saw his path. And she gives him the spiel, but it's clear that she's a little bit shook and flustered. And he asks about Orthos and whether or not he will have to apply separately. And she says, no, as your contracted partner, he is considered part of your strength. He will be competing with you. I thought that was surprising, because I kind of expected that for something like this, he would be under the same rules as he was for the duel, in which he was not allowed to use Orthos to his advantage. But I guess it makes sense, because the Skysworn, it's a different thing than like trying to see whether you individually can stand up against someone else individually. The Skysworn would want to take advantage as much as they can of whatever strength somebody can bring to the table. So I guess it makes sense that their standard is going to be different than it is for a duel. It's just surprised me. I didn't expect that that was going to be allowed. So they push further into the crowd after he has done his sign up and they're getting ready. And Lindon is really starting to get more and more anxious at the fact that everybody is having a very negative reaction to him. He's really feeling pretty self-conscious. The fact that he's out here without Yaren too, I feel like is an additional bit of anxiety for him, because he's been sort of used to having her whenever he's in like a crowd. He's not often out amongst people without her for backup. And Lindon asks Orthos to veil himself, but it's really clear that whether he does that or not doesn't really matter. That's not what people are reacting to. So they are walking through this crowd, and this boy steps up. He carried a round shield on one arm and held a long knife in the other. The knife rippled as though seen from underwater. I love the sound of that. That sounds so cool looking. A pink and white fish swirled through the air around his head. Lindon assumed that was his contracted partner, as the boy's pink gemstone eyes matched those of the fish. I just want to see this shit so bad. I really, really do. Black Flame, he said loudly, you should leave for your own safety. A general murmur of agreement and soft laughter rose from the crowd. Guys, I cannot handle this at all. I can't tell you, I fucking cackled. And I paused and I rewound because this was so good. He asked Orthos, is he going to attack me? Quietly, under his breath, in an effort to get a handle on the situation and what's about to happen, because privately, so that he can decide what to do. Orthos is not about that subtle life. Not interested. And he says, he is looking to stand out by provoking one of the Empire's villains in front of everyone. He is not confident enough in his results to let them speak for him, so he has to distinguish himself in another way. He is the weakest sort of scavenger, crawling along the bottom and looking for scraps. Crush him. Oh my God. Oh, that shit is so funny. Poor Lindon. I swear to God, he just wanted to have a little off to the side conversation, and Orthos is just like, oh no, I am about to tell on this boy. I am about to tell on his whole psychological state and how he knows he isn't shit and how pathetic this is. God damn. I love it so much. So Lindon tries very hard to make peace and be like, hey, sorry about him. Please, can I ask your name? But he doesn't even get to finish a sentence because his arm, which I will remind you all, is not under his control yet, just goes bananas and starts to go for this kid's throat. And at this point, the kid's raised his shield. And he tells him, you face Kotai Taiyan of the great Kotai clan. Defend yourself. And Lindon genuinely thinks to himself, oh man, I can't be doing this now. I haven't even recovered from the other thing. I still have a tryout to do. I don't want to do this. And he bends over to bow and say that he apologizes, and somebody kicks him in the back. And he stumbles forward. And when he turns around to see who did it, there's no telling. There's a million people, and they all look pissed, and they all look like they would have been willing to do it. And finally, he's just like, you know what? Fuck this. So he taps into his black flame and gets that really intimidating sheet of black fire flickering over him. And he turns around and tries to say, I have no reason to fight you. But he realizes that he hasn't intimidated Taiyan. He's provided the exact look of the bad guy so that Taiyan can make himself look better by fighting him. In essence, doing this, tapping into the black flame, encourages Taiyan to come at him when otherwise he may not have done it. And he says, this empire is no longer yours, and he charges at him. So Lindon launches himself forward, driving a punch at this kid's shield, at the gap around it, with the full expectation that this kid is going to shift and block him. And the kid does not do it. Instead, his ribs just cave in. And it really looks like this kid is dead. And Lindon's like, oh my God, fuck, this isn't what I intended to do. Oh my God. I mean, this kid goes flying. And Orthos is just laughing, hysterically laughing. Honestly, Orthos, you are a maniac, dude. I don't know what to do with you. He goes up to the kid and looks at his shield and eats it. Just eats his shield. Rude. So rude. So poor Lindon is just like, God damn it. I just wanted to show everyone that I couldn't be pushed around. To which I'm like, well, you did. I don't, he's like, hadn't wanted to kill anybody. And I'm like, no lie. I think that was the only way. And granted, the kid doesn't wind up dead. but it's close enough. He would have, had there not been somebody nearby to absolutely save his ass. And so I think if Lindon hadn't basically killed somebody, he wouldn't have gotten the reaction he wanted, which was for everybody to leave him the fuck alone. So everybody backs away from him, and it says even the other gray-skinned sacred artists backed away from Tyen as though to help him was to associate themselves with him, which is just really, people are ruthless in this world. Shit. So somebody pushes through, and Lindon's standing there realizing, like, oh man, if somebody's trying to fight me again, I don't know what I'm going to do, because I almost killed this kid, and I don't really know if I can pull my punches. I don't know if I can physically do that. And this girl steps up, and she can, like, barely walk without tripping all over herself, which I'm not certain if we see, like, what is going on with, like, her feet or her legs, if she's, you know, got an injury, or if she has, like, a construct leg or what. But it seems like she is just super, super clumsy. So she says, oh, wow, you really fucked him up. And I guess he hasn't been doing the training he's supposed to be doing, because he's supposed to be on the path of unstained shield, but that he should have done better than this. And Lindon asks, are you his friend? And she's like, well, I don't know him, but I do try to be nice to people. And she tells this kid to give her a second. And she dips into her pouch. And it says, I'm trying to find, her hand seemed to dip further into the pouch than it should have. And Lindon noticed that she wore tight black gloves up to her wrist. They seemed to be made out of the same substance as her staff, as though she had dipped her hands in glossy black liquid. Her gold sign, perhaps? So curious, you guys. I am dying. After a moment of rummaging around, she brightened, withdrawing a smooth white bottle with a cloth tied over its opening. She untied it in one swift motion, popping out a round green and gray pill. Lindon could smell it from where he stood, like a rainstorm in a pine forest. Doesn't that sound amazing, you guys? That description just immediately, I was like, ooh, that just sounds so beautiful. She tells this kid to open up and shoves the pill down his throat. And then all of a sudden, all this light shoots out of him. And he sits up like somebody yanked him. And she's just like, there we go. Good as new. Don't eat for an hour or two, or you might start vomiting up living creatures. I've done it. It's not pretty. What? So he looks at her and is like, oh my God, thank you so much. And then says, the black flame attacked me before I was... Bitch, were you really about to try and lie on Lindon in a crowd full of witnesses about how you didn't start this thing? Are you kidding? Weak. Okay? I hate you. I wish you died. Because you're just going to cause trouble again. That's the problem with somebody like that. He gets his ass kicked. And rather than learning a fucking lesson and realizing, you know what? I just tried to punch up out of my weight class. I better back off and learn some shit. No. Now he's just going to be resentful and simmering and waiting for his next chance to take Lindon down. And it's just going to be so annoying. And he's going to be so irritating about it. And I just don't want to watch that. I hate him. Ugh. So he says something, like he's in the middle of that sentence, and then he stops and says, Akura? And she says, Akura Mercy, I'm honored to meet you. And it says, if everyone had taken a step back when they'd seen Lindon crush the other guy's ribs, they fled at the mention of Mercy's family name. Even the other gray-skinned members of the Kotai clan abandoned their fallen cousins, scrambling to get away. There were two types of people who stayed. The ones who looked as confused as Lindon felt, and the ones who were bowing too deeply to run. I love that so much. And this kid's like, forgive my disrespect. I am not worthy of your help. And I'm like, no, you are not. And Mercy pushes herself to her feet and leans on her staff. And Lindon thinks he hears the staff snarl. And I was like, word? What is that? Ugh. I really, really enjoyed this whole thing. Meanwhile, Lindon says, what just happened to Orthos? And Orthos doesn't answer. And he turns around and Orthos has drawn himself into his shell. That is a bad sign when even Orthos is just like, no, I'm not doing that. We know that things are not going well. And Orthos is the one who explains that the Akura own this empire and that it's not even like one of their most valuable empires. They own multiples. So then we go to Ethan, who is going to Akura territory. And we are just over and over again let know that Ethan is very much out of his weight class right now. He's walking up to guards that could like vaporize him in a second. And this moment, two remnants, the dark green of murky swamp water, were 15 feet tall, resting on a pile of bleached human bones that were undoubtedly there for effect. Not that they were a deception. They had just chosen to leave the bones of those guards killed as a declaration to future visitors. Well, all right then. So, it was enough to make Ethan painfully aware of his status as an underlord, or rather, his lack of status. If the guards were to blast him to vapor, word would never reach the Black Flame Empire. Even if it did, the Emperor would be the one to apologize. I represent Naru Huan, Emperor of Black Flame Empire. I seek an audience with the highest-ranking member of the Akura clan available to me. And I like that we get all kinds of little, like, hints as to what proper protocol is and what's like acceptable to say and not. He doesn't ask to see the head of the family because that would be disrespectful in implying that he was worthy of their time. So by saying highest ranking available, it leaves it to their discretion who he's worthy of seeing. I love this part. Somewhere behind the wall, the fortress itself spewed fire into the air. He hoped they wouldn't ask him to go inside. It would severely derail his plans if he was captured in an Akura holding cell for 100 years. What is that? So finally, this old man comes forward. Those hands, let's see, I'm trying to find the spot. Hands crossed in front of him looked as though they'd been dipped in tar up to the elbow, the gold sign from the path of the chain keeper. He would be a blood descendant then, as though the purple eyes weren't enough of a clue. So, Mercy, evidently, is on the same path. And I like this. When he comes out, he just makes eye contact with Ethan. And Ethan is already like, oh my God, thank you. Because some other members of this clan, evidently, are very high on themselves and would have enjoyed making Ethan grovel for a while before engaging in conversation with him. And Ethan, greets him, and let's see, I'm trying to find the spot. Oh, yes. Our matriarch employs the greatest dream artists in the world. They have seen you. It seems there's been a great shift in fate recently. The currents of destiny change rapidly these days, and the dream readers have seen you in their flowing currents. And Ethan's like, oh God, because that kind of thing can sometimes precede simply being executed because you don't have a good part to play that they care to watch happen. So he says, she has left words for you. In other circumstances, we would have a feast for anyone so honored, but time runs short. Once and once alone, I will defend your empire from the fiend that rises against it. Soon I will have greater concerns, so you must raise protectors of your own. They will defend us all from the great calamity that follows. I await your success, Underlord. She has seen your plans and knows that you have a chance of success. And Ethan is like, man, I mean, that's cool, and I could definitely use her help, but I don't know if that's because she wants to help in general, or if there's something that she's going to be after. And Ethan asks, are there any instructions I should pass to my emperor? Justice says, we have made our will known to your empire regarding our fallen daughter. Whether she learns to fly or falls to her death, the imperial clan will be rewarded. And Ethan thinks to himself how glad he is that he brushed up on what's going on with her before coming here. And the Akura Justice, after this, sends him back on his way. So then we go to chapter 15. The application process was a race. I love this because Lindon is looking around at everybody who has all of these different means of traveling. And the descriptions, they rode sacred horses, or stood on flying swords, or spread their wings, or were carried in elaborate cages by constructs. He spotted Mercy, who had straddled her staff as though she were riding a horse, leaning forward and bracing herself on the weapon with both hands. It hovered a few feet off the ground, though she wobbled so much he wondered if she would fall off. The dragon's head at the end of the staff snarled, violet lights shining where they should be, as though they were eager to proceed. Shining where I should be, sorry. So Lindon says something like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with everybody on foot. And Orthos is like, well, get on my back, Dodo. Get up here. And Lindon's like, are you sure? Because I thought maybe you'd be offended if I asked you to do that. And he's like, offended at the fact that you're such a weak little boy that you need to ride on the very strong, awesome turtle who you made a contract with? Oh yeah, super insulting for me to be so strong that I'm literally carrying you through this audition. I'm the one that comes out looking weak. Sure, okay. Oh, it's good stuff. Orthos is just precious, and I love him so much. And then I love Lindon gets up there, and he's like, oh, thanks so much. This is going to be so much better. And then he gets up there, and it's so uncomfortable. And he's like, okay, you know what? And he's like about to get down, but things begin to progress before he's able to do that. And it's a combination of it just being spiky. There's nowhere like really to sit. He has to hold on desperately. And also Orthos's shell is like trying to burn through his pants. And he just has to keep on like defending himself from that. So they head out, and I'm not going to go through every stage of this, but he is doing okay at first, and then he comes up against these there's these like metal balls that are flying at him, these steel balls, and his arm is catching them, his new arm, but it isn't as concerned with defending him as it is with just sucking power out of these balls. So it's grabbing them, and then when it's done with them, it drops them and they're like deactivated, which is so cool. But it's not trying to like grab other ones. So he keeps getting like slammed in the ribs with them. And the third obstacle was a cloud of wasps. He almost cried. What does this have to do with enforcing the law? So the wasps began stinging him, and he both thanked and cursed Ethan for his blood-forged body. There was nothing it handled better than poison, but without its help he would have passed out. There were 4 more obstacles after that. So I don't know how he gets through this exactly, but Yaren obviously expects a lot from him. So when he's not the first to emerge from this cloud, and once he actually shows up, he's passed out in Orthos's mouth, doesn't make quite the impression Yaren was expecting. He groaned and moved in Orthos's mouth, so she reasoned he was fine. What rolled him over, she asked. Orthos spat him out. He needs a shell. You know what? Orthos ain't wrong. I'm not even mad at him for that. So, 3 days after qualification, there was a ceremony to welcome the new generation. And the red light that's like getting brighter and brighter is really starting to make everybody a little bit edgy and causing them to speed things up. So normally there would be like this massive like feast and whatnot, and they just don't have time. I love this so much. Each inductee was handed a green pin marked with a cloud, which would identify them until they graduated their training and received the Skysworn armor. For Lindon and Yaren, he practically threw their pin at them and gave them no greeting, but Lindon didn't mind. When all 60 trainees had been given their pins, they sat down for instruction. They stood in pairs, and Lindon's thinking to himself, maybe I'll be paired with Yaren, and that'd be pretty good. And he says you'll be separated into teams. Every pair of Skysworn gets 5 low golds and 1 high gold. Normally, we'd get you started by finding lost pets or delivering messages, something suited for your level of advancement. We don't have the luxury of that this time. And so he begins dividing people up. We always choose the better fighters among the young. We have to, because the bigger your weapon, the less you have to draw it. We've got the biggest hammer in the Empire, and everyone knows it. And everybody starts to cheer, but he's just like not responding. And so the cheer kind of dies out as they realize that Narugwe is not here for any of this nonsense. Honestly, I just love Narugwe. Like, he's an he's very much like Jai Long for me, where he's a bit of an asshole, yes, but also I totally get his point of view in a lot of ways, and he's not wrong, you know? It's just, he is wrong, but not entirely wrong. So he says, we'll need to defend the Empire from the traitors who want to take advantage of the fact that the Empire is scurrying like a kicked anthill and we're looking away. And I thought that was an interesting point, that like there are going to be people who try and take advantage of this crisis right now. And that didn't even really occur to me, but that makes total sense. Those of you who follow orders and distinguish yourselves, I look forward to calling you Skysworn. And at this point, they begin dividing everybody up, and he starts to realize that things aren't really like the way that they're dividing teams isn't according to like what he said. One team took only 4 low golds. A few picks later, another team skipped a low gold. Toward the end, an irritated-looking pair turned down a high gold. With 2 teams left to pick, there were 15 trainees remaining, including Lindon and Yaren. And eventually, everybody else is picked, and there are only 3 left. Yaren and Lindon and Akura Mercy. And let me tell you, I figure that this means Akura Mercy is going to be a new part of their crew. That she's going to be one of the Scooby Gang for the rest of the series, fingers crossed. And I am super excited about it because she seems adorable and also scary. And I love that combination. And I just want to find out more about her. And I am dying. I cannot wait. I want to know what she did, what she's like got going on, why her family wants to get rid of her, whether or not she resents them, or if she gets it, what happened, like all of it. I just want to know. Something's crooked here, Yaren said. She didn't bother to keep her voice quiet. You think so? Narugwe asked. He shrugged. Quit. With that, he turned and walked out of the room. All right, then. So for Renfei's part, which I respect, she doesn't try and be cute about it. She's like, look, you guys know. You've been singled out, and I think you know fucking why. And Mercy is like, I'm betting that my family was like, hey, if something happens to her, we're not going to be that mad about it. And Renfei tries to keep poker face, but Byro just nods and is like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And honestly, I love that Byro is like, Renfei is very much like lawful neutral. I would say maybe lawful good. I'm not sure enough about that yet, but definitely lawful. And Byro is just kind of like, I'm just going to say shit, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Which I relate in a lot of ways. So she says, there are more than a few people who would take any opportunity to settle things with an Akura who can't fight back. Then we have a Black Flame who the Skysworn don't like very much. And then she says, then she realizes that she doesn't know the names of Lindon or Yeren. And this is when Byro calls Yeren an emissary of Red Moon Hall. And Lindon tries to step in here and is like, no, wait, that's not how it is. And there is just, shit kind of goes really left here. They are about to get into a fight. And Lindon's wondering, like, why did they tell us what they're even doing here? Why would they just not let us, like, get teamed up and then abandon us and let us die? And then he realizes, like, oh, that's what you do when you're trying to cover for what you're trying to get done. They have so much power and so much support probably from everybody on the outside. They don't need to hide what they're doing. They can be very blatant about it and everybody will be fine with it and nobody will care. And Yeren, she and like Byro kind of like face down and finally sort of pull back a little bit as Lindon asks, are we still going to be given a chance to do our jobs? And Byro says, we won't put you anywhere you can hurt the Empire. Renfei says, we are only to supervise you. So long as you follow your instructions and contribute to our cause, we have been instructed to treat you as any other trainees. Until you betray us. We will not give you the safety net we give to the other students. One instance of insubordination, one refusal to fight, and there will be no disciplinary action. We are authorized to execute you on the spot. And Lindon is listening to this, and he's like, there has to be more to this. Because they seem very calm and certain that they'd be able to do that. And the three of us, we're not exactly weaklings. There's no reason why they should be so confident that they can take us down. So clearly they have something else up their sleeves that we don't know about. And I was like, that's a really good point, Lindon. Good for you for noticing that. It didn't even occur to me. I'm just figuring that, of course, they're going to call in backup. But they might not have time to do that. And they must know that. So there has to be some other source of their confidence for this. But there was a small part of him that was focused and excited. They hadn't killed him from behind, so this was a puzzle with a solution. He moved over to Yeren, ready to calm her down. Then the light turned red and the world was cast into chaos. And that is the end of the chapter. So, later on, tomorrow, is the final episode of Skysworn, and then we get into Ghostwater, which has a pretty dope cover. I just had to make the banner for it today, and I thought it was pretty cool looking. So yeah, I'm really excited. I have no idea what to expect for the end of this book. I just don't know. So I can't wait. Yay! I'm so excited. Thank you, Andy, very much for commissioning this, and thank you to Andy and Phil for being in the chat and chatting with me and giving me some info. And I can't wait to see you all tomorrow. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.